Namibian President Hage Geingob has died. Vice President Nangolo Mbumba made the announcement on Sunday, stating that the president had passed away in the early hours of the morning. He died at Lady Pohamba Hospital in Namibia's capital, Windhoek. 83-year-old Geingob had been diagnosed with cancer and revealed to the public last month that he had begun receiving treatment. His history of health struggles dates back to 2015, when he announced that he had survived prostate cancer, up until last year when he said he had undergone surgery in neighboring South Africa. Geingob was serving his last term in office as the third president of Namibia. The country is set to hold presidential and parliamentary elections in November. The nation's cabinet is expected to reconvene immediately to make necessary state arrangements for the late president's send-off.
The Namibian nation has lost a distinguished servant of the people, a liberation struggle icon, the chief architect of our constitution, and the pillar of the Namibian House. At this moment of deepest sorrow, I appeal to the nation to remain calm and collected, while the government attends to all necessary state arrangements, preparations, and other protocols. Cabinet will convene with immediate effect in order to make the necessary state directives in this regard. May the soul of our beloved Dr. Hage Geingob rest in eternal peace.
The US and the UK have launched attacks against dozens of sites in Yemen. The Pentagon says the US attacks hit military facilities which Houthi forces have used to attack Israel-linked ships in the Red Sea. John Gabriel with the Associated Press has more from Jerusalem.
As of right now, the US and the British are acknowledging these airstrikes that they say targeted sites in Houthi-held Yemen. Now, these attacks were across some 6 provinces in Yemen. That's according to the Houthis and their state-run Saba news agency tonight. Now, we don't know exactly what the extent of the damage is, nor if there was anybody injured in these attacks. But what we do know is that the U.S. launched FA-18 fighter jets off the Dwight D. Eisenhower aircraft carrier, and American warships that are in the Red Sea launched Tomahawk cruise missiles, and it targeted sites, some 13 sites across Yemen in that Houthi-controlled territory. Now, the Houthis have acknowledged that these attacks even hit Sana'a, which is the capital they've held since 2014, and we've seen online videos from people in Sana'a showing just fireballs and clouds of smoke, as well as the sound of explosions echoing across the mountains in that capital. Now, as of right now, again, this is all coming as we've seen these attacks that were in Syria and Iraq. They follow about a week ago when we saw that attack on a military base in Jordan that killed 3 U.S. troops and wounded dozens of others. Those attacks were blamed on Iranian-backed militias in Iraq that the Americans say have direct ties to Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard. Tonight, these attacks, they did not mention the Revolutionary Guard. They didn't really even mention Iran as part of this, but they did mention the fact that the Houthis are launching these attacks on the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, that are disrupting cargo shipments as well as energy shipments around the world. Now, we've also heard tonight from U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and he said the following, and I quote, "This collective action sends a clear message to the Houthis that they will continue to bear further consequences if they do not end their illegal attacks on international shipping and naval vessels. We will not hesitate to defend lives and the free flow of commerce in one of the world's most critical waterways." We've also heard from the Houthis, one of the members of its Politburo tonight, saying that they'll continue their attacks to back the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip amid Israel's war on Hamas. They say that escalation will be met with escalation.
The United States has also launched airstrikes in Iraq and Syria against targets it says are linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard and militias it backs. The U.S. military used the long-range B-1 bombers. Washington says the strikes are in retaliation for the deadly attack on U.S. troops last weekend in Jordan. Iran has condemned the U.S. attacks, and Iraq has summoned the U.S. chargé d'affaires in Baghdad to deliver a formal protest. Here's John Gabriel with the Associated Press once again with more from Jerusalem.
We've heard from a lot of Middle Eastern countries over the last day or so since the U.S. launched those airstrikes on Iraq and Syria. Interesting thing to note is that while these Houthi strikes, they did not directly mention Iran. In the Syria and Iraq strikes, they mentioned Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard, which has been arming and supplying militias in the wider Middle East for years as part of their efforts to counter what they see as Israel's and the U.S. influence in the region. So we've heard from Syria and Iraq both condemning these attacks. We've heard from militia groups in Syria suggesting that they're going to continue their attacks, saying that the Iraqi government itself is weak and unable to get the U.S. troops that have been based in Iraq for years now as part of the anti-Islamic State fight to leave. And we're also hearing from Iran, which said that these attacks were escalatory. Iran condemned these attacks, and wider across the region, it just shows how wide this conflict has gotten and how deeply entrenched the U.S. has become, even after pulling out largely from the region after the Iraq and the wars in Afghanistan.
Thousands of people have been protesting in several parts of Israel to demand a change in government. In the coastal town of Caesarea, protesters marched towards one of the private residences of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And in Tel Aviv, protesters gathered at Habima Square demanding immediate elections. Protesters also called for negotiations for the release of remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza. New analysis by the BBC shows that more than 50% of the buildings in the Gaza Strip have been damaged or destroyed since Israel's retaliatory offensive began last October. According to the UN, the conflict has left more than 80% of Gaza's population homeless. Some Palestinians are now taking shelter in destroyed buildings, even though it puts their lives in danger. Our correspondent Noor Harazin has more.
Among the destroyed walls of this Palestine primary UN school, located in the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, we found Palestinian families taking shelter in damaged or destroyed buildings as they ran out of safe shelters options. The school was under heavy Israeli bombings over the past few weeks. Following the withdrawal of the Israeli army, families stormed into the school and made it their new home. Despite the danger of the building's imminent collapse, the Hamdan family could not find another place to live after the destruction of their home in Beit Hanun.
We stay in this destroyed building. We live in fear that the building will fall on us. 2 days ago, the roof of a bathroom fell on a man. He suffered major head injuries and lost consciousness. A child was also injured. We have no other place to go and no other choice.
Palestinians living in Gaza are running out of sheltering choices. The schools are full. The tents are not strong enough to protect them from the rain, and the partly destroyed buildings are the last option.
Our 6-story house in the north was bombed and 42 people lie dead under the rubble. We have not been able to reach them. We were displaced to the city of Khan Yunis first, then we fled to the city of Rafah after the Israeli tanks stormed in. We found no shelter for ourselves except under the rubble. It's a very unsafe place, but we have no other choice.
The Gaza Strip may need years of reconstruction before the displaced can go back to a normal life in homes. But with so much destruction, homes are not the only thing in need of repair. The infrastructure also needs to be rebuilt, like electricity lines, water and sewage systems, even the internet and communications lines. Noor Harazin, CGTN, Gaza.
Forest fires in central Chile have killed at least 51 people, and authorities say the death toll is expected to rise. Emergency services are struggling to contain flames threatening urban areas, with black smoke seen billowing over the Valparaiso region, housing about 1 million people. The coastal tourist city of Vina del Mar has been the hardest hit. Rescue teams are striving to reach all the affected areas. Interior Minister Carolina Toja said the country is facing its worst disaster since an earthquake in 2010 killed about 500 people. Wildfires are common in Chile during the summer months. Last year's wildfires spread over 400,000 hectares, killing 27 people. The area affected by the recent wildfires increased to 43,000 hectares between Friday and Saturday. Authorities are concerned that some of the active fires are inching closer to urban zones. Hundreds of protesters from around the U.S. have flocked to a Texas border town to vent over illegal immigration and show support for former President Donald Trump. The Take Our Border Back protest began with a vehicle convoy from Virginia that rolled into a ranch in the remote town of Quemado on Friday night. Our correspondent Frank Contreras has more from Quemado.
Protests here today on Saturday have been peaceful. The demands are very clear on the part of the protesters. They say essentially that states have the sovereign right, they say, to protect themselves against any incursions from the outside, including from international immigrants coming from the South. And so that's the debate here, and whether or not it's the states who have the right, or should it be the federal government taking care of that. Well, as a journalist, I've been reporting on this issue for more than 30 years now. We've never seen so many undocumented migrants attempting to cross in one time. The political pressure, though, is really starting to build up, especially in the lead up to the election. As a result, immigration is becoming one of the main, if not the main political issue in the lead up to the 2024 U.S. presidential election. The decision by the Florida Governor DeSantis to send about 2,000 troops, those are state guard troops created during the pandemic, but also National Guard troops from Florida. Those decisions could further complicate the situation here. It's all floating around the issue of what is the role of the state when it comes to protecting borders, and what role should the federal government have. The Republicans and those who support Donald Trump, many of the people here are supporters of Donald Trump. They strongly believe that the states have the right to take these measures. And so that the state of Florida, though it's a distance from here, they believe they have the right to send troops and block off the border, in part because they say the federal government is not taking that action. For its part, the Biden administration says, no, that's our job. It is up to the federal government to watch over the international borders. And so this issue is coming right down to that. That argument is going to drag out for months.
And that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from around the continent and Africa Live. I'll see you in a bit. Thanks for watching. This is Africa Live. Hello and thank you for joining us. I am Penina Karibe in Nairobi. Namibian President Hage Geingob has died. Vice President Nangolo Mbumba made the announcement on Sunday, stating that the president had passed away in the early hours of the morning. He died at Lady Pohamba Hospital in Namibia's capital, Windhoek. 82-year-old Geingob had been diagnosed with cancer and revealed to the public last month that he had begun receiving treatment. His history of health struggles dates back to 2015, when he announced that he had survived prostate cancer, up until last year, when he said he had undergone surgery in neighboring South Africa. Geingob was serving his last term in office as the third president of Namibia. The country is set to hold presidential and parliamentary elections in November. The nation's cabinet is expected to reconvene immediately to make necessary state arrangements for the late president's send-off.
The Namibian nation has lost a distinguished servant of the people, a liberation struggle icon, the chief architect of our constitution, and the pillar of the Namibian House. At this moment of deepest sorrow, I appeal to the nation to remain calm and collected, while the government attends to all necessary state arrangements, preparations, and other protocols. Cabinet will convene with immediate effect in order to make the necessary state directives in this regard. May the soul of our beloved Dr. Hage Geingob rest in eternal peace.
Let's cross to Namibia's capital, Windhoek, where journalist Jemima Bukas joins us live via Zoom. Jemima, what more can you tell us about the passing of President Geingob?
Good morning. The passing of the president came as a huge surprise to many Namibians. What I must say, the one thing that has left a bitter taste in the in the mouth of many Namibians would be the fact that they have not been informed properly about the state of affairs around the president's health. We were told that he went to the United States for a medical treatment, and the impression was given that he was doing fairly well, and not that he was literally on his deathbed. And even when the last statement was issued last night before he passed on, the presidency said that he had showed signs of improvement, and the doctors were working around the clock to make sure that his health is prioritized. And then barely a few hours later, he passed on. So that is the one thing that Namibians are really upset about when you speak to ordinary Namibians around the country and on the street, the fact that they were not told just how serious the illness of the president really was. And many people were caught completely off guard. He has been a very jovial, a very high-spirited person. He was very active. He loved playing the football, or when he saw a football, he would kick it. And for such a man to just die almost overnight, you can imagine the kind of shock and how stunned the nation is right now.
Well, he has been unwell in recent weeks. How has this affected the government and the politics there? And how does his passing away now impact the coming elections?
So the government, when he was ill, the Constitution has put measures in place to address a scenario such as this. However, we would know more once the acting president will be sworn in the next few minutes or a few hours. I'm here at State House, and they're preparing to do so. A high-level committee has also been appointed, and this committee will be led by the current Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, and the party's presidential candidate, Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah. They will be in charge of this. This committee will handle the funeral, as well as I suppose matters around the succession of the presidency. Given that this is quite a dilemma at this point. The Constitution provides for a 90-day acting period, but then we are also heading into elections in the next few months. So yeah, it's difficult to tell at this point what exactly it would look like in the next few days and weeks.
Jemima, talk to us about the legacy he leaves behind.
So, the late President Geingob, may his soul rest in peace, and condolences to his family and the Namibian nation. He will certainly leave behind a contested legacy, mixed bag of feelings. He was the most loved president. I mean, the presidential elections, in election results in 2014 showed that he got 87%. That was the highest ever for a presidential candidate after independence. However, it has significantly dropped in the 2019 elections, when he just made it as the president. So he was loved because he was a very jovial person. He loved mingling with the people, which was not the case with his predecessors. However, he will also be remembered as the president that presided over a skyrocketing unemployment rate, especially youth unemployment that currently stands at just over 40%. He will also be remembered as the president that was extremely condescending towards the media, even though State House was opened up during his time, but he was rude and condescending. And there was a lot of secrecy during his administration around issues such as the green hydrogen. That was his, as they would say, his baby. It was his brainchild. And for that, there's a lot of controversy around this green hydrogen project. So that would be one of the issues that would count against him. The other thing is the fish rod bribery scandal, seen as the biggest scandal in the Namibian history after independence. And his name was also linked to this, unfortunately. And it was rumored that the proceeds from that bribery scandal that involved Icelandic fishing companies funded his presidential campaign. It is not proven yet, but still it leaves, it has cast a shadow over his presidency in the last administration. Namibia is also boasts with the second highest income inequality rate in the world, following South Africa, and that has been exacerbated under his governance. So the majority will remember him as the president under whose term and time this country has dropped into almost complete poverty. Poverty. I mean, at this point, we have almost a quarter of this country that are unemployed. We have a lot of people that are impoverished. Basically, the country's economy is in tatters. So that is the thing that will overshadow all of his liberation credentials, for instance.
All right, thank you very much for that. Jemima Bakers joining us via Zoom from Windhoek.